Some of the biggest JRPG franchises have been going on for decades now, so it only makes sense that some of those games are less loved than others, and it's not really a bad thing. There are definitely some instances where that's deserved, but it's not always the case. Sometimes it's not deserved. Today I want to talk about some games that I think get a little more hate than they deserve. They aren't necessarily disliked, they may not have bad reviews or anything like that, but they don't get nearly enough love, even if there are a group of people who will cheer from the mountaintops every time they're mentioned. So I'm going to be that little voice cheering from the mountaintops for some of the games that I love. Dragon Quest VII is actually my favorite Dragon Quest game. For a lot of people, that title would go to something like Dragon Quest VIII, which is a great game, or maybe Dragon Quest V, also a great game. And maybe if you look at them a bit more objectively, they're the better games. But Dragon Quest VII has something unique to offer that a lot of the other Dragon Quest games don't have in the same way. That thing, I think, is the thrill of discovery, which could translate to frustration depending on your perspective. One of the main things that you do in Dragon Quest VII is you find fragments that open up different new areas. You can do that by going through main events during the story, or occasionally finding them out in the wild. This completely changed Dragon Quest for me and turned it into something new and exciting. I've always liked this concept, so that's why I really loved Soul Blazer, which does this thing where you kill a bunch of enemies and that opens up new areas. It gives exploration a new and exciting aspect. I think for people that enjoy exploration, you'll love Dragon Quest VII too. The remake of the game added a way to find those fragments with a little bit less frustration, so if you want that, that's something that it has. Xenoblade Chronicles X is a game that a lot of people seem to really love. Not as many people actually played it, and that's for a few reasons. Xenoblade X was on the Wii U, never left it, so that's probably the main reason not enough people played it. It's also a sort of offshoot from the main Xenoblade series, and doesn't have quite the same feel of those games, a little bit different. There are also some problems with Xenoblade X. The characters never quite hit the same heights as the other Xenoblade games, and the plot, it's a bit hit or miss, but the upsides are pretty huge. Exploration goes insane in Xenoblade Chronicles X. The entire massively huge map is covered in things to see and explore, with resources that you can gather scattered throughout. And it's not just exploration on foot, but also eventually through the use of a giant mech, which gets the ability to move quickly on wheels and ultimately fly, allowing you to get up to those impossible to reach points. Mechs also have complete equipment loadouts, which are a big part of the combat, so anyone that is really into mechs or wants to explore a huge world should definitely check this game out. Dark Souls 2 is very clearly the black sheep of the Dark Souls series. Part of that is the lack of involvement from the main man himself, Miyazaki, who took a backseat and only supervised the game, something he himself says he regrets when looking back on it. But Dark Souls 2 isn't actually a bad game, as much as some people would like you to think it is. In fact, it was the game in the series that got me into Souls games as a whole. I like the fact that it had a bit more of a straightforward story in some ways. I say that very loosely because it's still a Souls game, it's still very vague. The combat is still there, the exploration is still there. Honestly, most of the Souls experience is still there. It's only not as good when you directly compare it to other Souls games like Dark Souls and Dark Souls 3. If you compare it to any Souls-like, you will quickly see it rises above all the rest. So I would say don't skip Dark Souls 2. Even the lowest tier on the Dark Souls totem pole, still pretty damn good. Ys is one of my favorite action RPG series for a variety of reasons. Ys Arc of Napishtim was actually the second Ys game that I fully completed from start to finish. I came out of it loving what I just played, but I've learned that a decent amount of people didn't have the same experience that I did. People tend to say it's good, but always with the intro that it was the first Ys game of this style, it had rough edges, or it wasn't the best Ys game, but this or but that. I personally think it's right up there with Oath and Felghana as an experience, especially if you play the PC version, which allows you to do things like warp around, which apparently wasn't a thing in the PS2 version. So for anyone looking to get into the East series, I would probably still say start with Oath and Felghana, but Arc Napishtim is definitely an East game you shouldn't skip. There's a lot of fun to be had from playing through it. Tales of Graces is one of the less well-received Tales games, generally. I wouldn't say it's at the bottom of the list, but it's definitely not at the top for the majority of people. But Tales of Graces F has by far the best combat system in any Tales game, and in my opinion, it's not close. The way that you can dodge and move around adds a much-needed skill element that allows you to take on some of the biggest challenges in the game, including a certain battle you aren't necessarily supposed to be able to win. But also has a fun cast that reminds me quite a bit of the cast from Tales of Eternia, though that could just be because of Sophie and Melody's twin-tail haircut. The main story may not be the most incredible, but I think the cast makes up for it, and the fact that it has a romance that actually goes somewhere, unlike a lot of JRPGs where the romance doesn't go anywhere. So I would say if combat is a big part of what you love, or you're someone that likes romance and JRPGs, give Tales of Graces F a shot. There are a lot of games that people think are underrated, so this list is definitely not comprehensive. I've just covered some of the games that are the most personally relevant to me, so let me know if you have any games you think deserve a little more love. Thanks for watching.